To understand our world, we must look through the lens of why.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something a little dark. We're embarking on a philosophical investigation into the modern corporate landscape. We're really looking at a profound shift in how we exist, not just as workers, but as human beings. We'll be pulling from some of the most piercing thinkers of the past couple of centuries to examine a very modern tragedy. Basically, how the workplace, fueled by digital technology and this relentless corporate culture, didn't just optimize your productivity, it literally came for your soul. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever been sitting in a meeting, just surrounded by buzzwords like synergy or radical belonging or purpose, and felt this strange, almost suffocating weight? Like a creeping feeling that you're being asked to give way more than just your hours, but your actual inner self? Well, you absolutely aren't alone. We're witnessing a complete transformation of what capitalism demands from us. It's shifted from physical labor to total emotional and psychological surrender. To really get this, let's look at an observation from philosopher Slavoj Žižek. He points out this incredibly stark contrast. In the past, industrial capitalism was, well, brutally honest. The factory worker endured blunt cruelty and totally meaningless repetitive tasks. But there was a silver lining. They were completely free to hate their job. Their inner life was still their own. Today, though, the demand is far more perverse. The modern worker is expected to exhibit joyful servitude. You have to have emotional loyalty. You're forced to believe in the brand. Capitalism today doesn't just want your labor, it wants you to actively love your own exploitation. Okay, let's dive into part one, the corporate sickness unto death. So how did we actually arrive at this total collapse of the self? For that, we can look to the 19th century philosopher Soren Kierkegaard. He defines despair not as, just crying in a dark room, but as a sickness unto death. For Kierkegaard, the self isn't just a static thing you're born with. It's a living tension. It's a task. It's your conscious relation to yourself and to higher ideals. Despair is what happens when that relation collapses. And today, this happens through over-identification. We take the grand, eternal tension of the human self, and we flatten it into a highly curated LinkedIn profile. We shrink our entire existence to fit a professional role. It leads to this very quiet, highly productive, and perfectly managed despair. Writer Mary Harrington captures the tragedy of this collapse so perfectly. She argues that we've essentially traded our eternal nature for fragile, market-driven constructs. Think about it. Instead of souls, which are anchored and profound, we have identities. We assemble them, we optimize them for the algorithm or the hiring manager, and we trade them on the open market. Our inner life just becomes another asset to leverage. We can actually trace this shrinking of our inner lives in three distinct stages. First, we started with the soul, a metaphysical anchor rooted in tradition and the eternal. Then, with modern consciousness, this evolved into the self, a space for deep existential inquiry and personal responsibility. But today, we've arrived at identity. This is a purely digital corporate construct. It doesn't live within you, it lives in the mirror of others. It's constantly seeking validation, visibility, and employment. It's brittle, and it's entirely dependent on whatever the market wants today. Moving right along to part two, the corrupted corporate Übermensch. If we're really trading our souls for corporate identities, how did modern work hijack the very concept of self-creation? For this, we have to turn to Friedrich Nietzsche. He offered humanity a radical escape from traditional ideals. He essentially said scrap inherited notions of truth and humility. He called for the creation of the Übermensch, the Superman. He urged us to create our own values, to let our will become sovereign, unapologetic fire. He wanted humans to become like gods, carving out our own meaning in an indifferent universe. But here is the tragic irony. That grand Nietzschean rebellion, it devolved. We're all little gods now, sure, constantly branding ourselves and curating our truths on social media, but we aren't doing it to achieve sovereign greatness. We're doing it to optimize our leverage in the corporate strategy deck. The sacred has been entirely replaced by the useful. Our new ideals aren't truth or beauty anymore. They are quarterly growth, internal synergy, and public perception. We inherited Nietzsche's rebellion, but we traded away all its grandeur for a corporate lanyard. And this new moral logic demands a totalizing performance from us. Just look at these bizarre, but completely real, I might add, requirements pulled from actual modern job postings. You are demanded to bring your whole self to work. You might be asked to host joy circles or moderate Slack channels dedicated to #purpose porn. You have to co-create radical belonging and essentially be totally comfortable crying in meetings. This is literally a new managerial mysticism. It operates like a theology without a god, where your burnout is blamed on your failure to properly embody the corporate culture, rather than the reality of your own exploitation.
Which brings us to part 3, the behaviorist hive mind.
So, how is this theological corporate culture actually enforced? Because it's not just peer pressure, it's hardwired into the systems we use every single day. Scholar Shoshana Luboff identifies the engine of this enforcement as instrumentarian power. Under surveillance capitalism, human experience is subjugated to market mechanisms and reborn simply as behavior. Your reflective meaning, your inner depth, your soul, none of it matters to the machine. You're reduced to observable behavioral data. This data is extracted, torn right from your life to manufacture predictions and modify your actions. The ultimate goal? Complete certainty and control. So, the crucial point is that this system acts exactly like a behaviorist hive mind, and it relies on a very specific toolkit. It tunes and herds our behavior through continuous psychological conditioning. It preemptively targets anything non-harmonious. It entirely substitutes human trust with machine certainty. In this hive, our individual freedom is forfeited for guaranteed, predictable outcomes. The modern workplace, which is deeply integrated with these digital networks, actively smothers our inwardness to turn us into perfectly predictable, well-adjusted little participants in the hive. And this psychological invasion aligns perfectly with what theorist Mark Fisher called capitalist realism. In our modern control society, work and life become utterly inseparable. As Fisher noted, capital follows you even when you dream. Furthermore, the massive stress generated by this system, it's completely privatized. Instead of recognizing that rising rates of mental distress are a systemic failure of this exhausting corporate culture, the system frames it as a personal, individual failing. It's on you to fix your psychological distress, to meditate more, to be more resilient, all while the meat grinder of capital just continues unabated. Decades ago, the philosopher and psychoanalyst Erich Fromm actually saw this automated synthetic trajectory coming. He warned, the danger of the past was that men became slaves. The danger of the future is that man may become robots. Robotized men will neither rebel nor dream. They'll be perfect functionaries in the system, sure, but they will no longer be human. The ultimate success of the corporate hive mind is when we willingly surrender our humanity to become highly optimized, undreaming components of the machine. All right, let's shift gears to the final stage, part 4, reclaiming the human soul. So, what's the escape plan? How do we break out of this? To find our way out of this digital and corporate abyss, we can look to the philosopher Albert Camus and the myth of Sisyphus. Remember Sisyphus? He was condemned to push a giant boulder up a hill for eternity, only to watch it roll back down every single time. Well, Camus said we must imagine Sisyphus happy, finding dignity in the struggle itself. Today, our boulder is the seemingly endless feed of social media, the relentless barrage of Slack notifications, the monotonous performative curation of our professional identities. It's a reality that is largely indifferent and honestly unwelcoming to true authenticity. Camus argues that to survive, you first have to recognize the absurdity of it all. Freedom begins when you see these personalized realities created by algorithms and the bizarre demands of toxic corporate positivity for exactly what they are, completely absurd. You must defy digital determinism. You have to refuse the demand to fall in love with your own exploitation. Your soul, your inner character, is not a commodity to be optimized for a quarterly performance review. You must actively choose to remain human. The modern workplace, fully backed by surveillance capitalism, has constructed a perfect machine for extracting your most intimate depths and turning them into metrics. So the question isn't just whether technology will take over our jobs. The much heavier, lingering question drawn from all these thinkers is this. As you optimize your identity, moderate your joy circles, and hand over your inner life to the market, will you even notice when you've stopped being human? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and I challenge you to...
Why settle for shallow facts? Join the intellectual rebellion. Subscribe to Why Lens now.